generally. And then any cloud and outbreaks of rain soon peter out through the evening, with lengthy clear spells for a time overnight. But increasingly, there'll be further clouds spilling into Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, northwest England and North Wales, with some light outbreaks of rain. A breezy night, so most places staying in the double figures, but I think northern Scotland dipping to 5 to 8 Celsius. There'll be further showers in the north of Scotland, and that strong wind continues into tomorrow, with the risk of gales again for exposed coasts. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud cover, some outbreaks of rain through these central parts. But the far south and southeast, well, here, brighter skies, with temperatures reaching the high teens, perhaps low 20s. Then into the start of the weekend, we're going to see the weather settling down, increasingly sunny skies building from the south, and with that sunshine we'll see temperatures recovering. So it's going to be turning warmer, with temperatures quite widely up to 17 to 21 Celsius.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast, with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Yes, good morning, everybody. How are you? Patrick Christie's here, alongside the wonderful Mercy Moroki. We're with you all the way through until midday. Action-packed show today, ladies and gentlemen, because, of course, this is your show, isn't it?
Yes, you've been getting in touch all week, telling us what you want us to discuss today. We're delivering, of course. We're talking about NHS. We're also going to be touching on that horrible shooting that's taken place in the US overnight. And, of course, today is also Grey Day, Sue Gray Day. We finally get to know what's in that now infamous Sue Gray report that Boris Johnson has been asking us to wait for.
Yes, indeed. I don't really care about it, do you? Anyway, right, so thank you very much, everyone who obviously has been getting in touch with us with suggestions, and we've got such a varied show for you this morning. GBViews at gbnews.uk. We're also looking at the impact of advertising and gambling, of course, the US interfering in Northern Ireland as well.
And DIY, again, we get 2 days in a row. DIY is my favourite topic. You weren't here yesterday, but me and Tom very much enjoyed discussing that. We'll be discussing it again.
I mean, I'm feeling better, by the way. Thanks for asking. But GBViews at gbnews.uk. First, it's your latest headlines.
A very good morning. It's 2 minutes past 10. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. Now, there are conflicting reports on whether the civil servant Sue Gray's long-awaited findings into lockdown parties have actually been submitted to Downing Street. GB News is awaiting confirmation, and we'll bring it to you here when we know for sure. The civil servant is expected to be highly critical of the culture at number 10. It's after new photographs were leaked to ITV News showing the Prime Minister raising a glass at an office gathering in November 2020. Well, Boris Johnson has promised to publish the report in full. The Environment Minister, George Eustice, told GB News MPs shouldn't rush to judge.
Convention is that ministers should not knowingly, and MPs indeed, should not knowingly mislead Parliament. That is, the Prime Minister's given an account of his understanding of these events. But the Committee on Standards and Privileges are looking at this. They're obviously going to want to themselves take evidence from the Prime Minister and from others, before reaching a judgment. And I think we should let them, do that work and not get ahead of ourselves.
At least 19 children and 2 teachers have been killed by a teenage gunman in Texas. The 18-year-old suspect, named by authorities as Salvador Ramos, opened fire at a primary school in Uvalde. He was shot dead by an officer at the scene. Authorities believe he acted alone, but currently his motive isn't clear. President Joe Biden has ordered flags to be flown at half-mast until sunset on Saturday. The president says Congress must pass new gun laws.
As a nation, we have to ask, when in God's name are we going to stand up to the gun lobby? When in God's name we do what we all know in our gut needs to be done? 10 years since I stood up at a high school in Connecticut, a grade school in Connecticut, where another gunman massacred 26 people, including 20 first graders at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Since then, there have been over 900 incidents.
The Chancellor is expected to unveil a new plan to help families struggling with the cost of living. Rishi Sunak is reportedly meeting Boris Johnson later to sign off a multi-billion-pound plan which will be announced tomorrow. A new windfall tax on energy firms could be used to fund the package. It's after Ofgem, the energy regulator, warned the energy price cap could rise by a further £830 in October. The RMT union is warning the UK is facing its biggest rail strike in modern history after members overwhelmingly voted in favour of industrial action. More than 40,000 members from Network Rail and 15 train companies took part in the ballot following a dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. The strike is set to cause major travel disruption, but the RMTs told GB News the action won't be taking place over the Platinum Jubilee weekend. The union's Senior Assistant General, Secretary Eddie Dempsey, says rail firms have made millions during the pandemic and his members need a pay rise.
Our members, some of them are now in the 3rd year of a pay freeze. Inflation, RPI is at 11.1% now, and this is the biggest cost of living crisis people are saying since records began, and they're feeling the pinch. They regard themselves as having worked extremely hard during the pandemic in difficult circumstances to keep the country moving, and they feel now that they're being betrayed.
The government has approved the sale of Chelsea Football Club, saying it's satisfied the full proceeds will not benefit Roman Abramovich. The billionaire was sanctioned over his links to the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Last night, the Premier League approved the £4.25 billion takeover by a consortium led by the co-owner of the LA Dodgers. The government says the money will be used to help victims of the war in Ukraine. Nicola Sturgeon has become Scotland's longest-serving First Minister. Miss Sturgeon, the first woman in Bute House, has been in power since 2014. She replaced Alex Salmond, who quit in the wake of the 2014 independence referendum after serving for 7 years. You're up to date now on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, let's head back to the point.
Good morning. The time is 10:07 and it's Wednesday the 25th of May, and this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Patrick Christie's on your TV, radio, online and on the app.
Yes, and of course Wednesday means one thing and one thing only. Our show is dedicated to the issues that you really care about.
Yes, that's right. All week we've been asking you to tell us what you want us to talk about, and we've got some great discussions lined up for you with some expert guests. And of course, we'll be bringing you a couple of major updates on some important goings-on in the world today.
Yes, indeed. And of course, Mercy's favourite topic, weirdly, DIY, is on our to-do list. Lots of you got in touch asking for advice on improving your homes during the cost of living crisis, saying you simply can't afford to fork out on tradesmen. We'll be joined by interior design expert and TV presenter Michelle O'Gunderhan to give her top tips on how you can improve your home on a budget.
You missed a riveting DIY debate between myself and
Did I? Is there such a thing?
Yes, there is. And lots of you have been getting in touch as well, asking why the US keeps poking its nose into the Northern Ireland Protocol issue. We'll discuss this with an expert guest on Northern Ireland later.
Yes, and Inaya Falarian-Mann will be with us to discuss the Black Lives Matter movement and answer your questions about it truthfully, without spin. Alan from Salford has a question. He's asked whether it's true that they're a self-confessed Marxist group. Well, we've got a manifesto, Alan, you can go and have a look at it, but we'll be giving you all that info later.
Yes, and news that can't be ignored, sadly, for many of us.
Yes.
The Grey Report will apparently be published today into lockdown parties. Of course, we don't know exactly when, but we will bring you updates on that on GB News throughout the day.
Yes, we'll be absolutely all over it. Anyway, packed show, but don't worry, of course, we'll get your views in as usual as well. Message in gbviews@gbnews.uk.
But we start this morning with a horrendous story coming out of the United States. This morning, 19 children and 2 teachers have been killed in a mass shooting in South Texas. This comes after an 18-year-old gunman reportedly opened fire at an elementary school. Speaking from the White House, President Biden condemned the atrocity and urged Americans to stand up to the US gun lobby.
Yeah, well, security expert Will Geddes is here with us right now in the studio. Will, thank you very much for joining us, mate. Yet another school shooting in America.
Yeah, horrific, and actually the 27th this year.
Goodness me.
If that gives you some sort of context of how bad a problem it is over there.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. What needs to be done?
Well, there are a couple of things. Number one, I think politically we're probably not going to see any change. We're going to see all these politicians, including obviously the president, with a stack load of rhetoric. I think the only potential hope that we can look at is the NRA conference, which is at the end of this week, which might give us some indication, but I think highly unlikely. I think the key thing here is no one wants to remove that amendment right to have or bear arms. But what they have to do is control it better. And at the moment, the estimated number is in excess of 400 million privately owned firearms in the United States. And at the moment, there are just very few controls to stop people getting their hands on them.
Yeah, and as far as I understand it from this case, correct me if I'm wrong, this was an 18-year-old man who purchased these weapons, actually, I think on his birthday, and illegally. He purchased them legally. Why does an 18-year-old need an automatic rifle? That's only surely for one thing and one thing only.
Well, I'm going to break that down a little bit, Mercy. I mean, we look at the fact that in the United States and the vast majority of states, including Texas, you have to be over 21 to have an alcoholic drink. So if you're able to get hold of a firearm, and again, it's this question of legal. Now, yes, you can go to a gun store, yes, you can buy a firearm, and yes, you will go through some certain checks. The ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms Federal Unit, Law Enforcement Agency, will do background checks to see if you have any history of domestic crime or criminality, and that will be the only thing that will prevent you potentially getting hold of it. But then you have these gun markets, which are totally legitimate, but they are not controlled. And we could go to a gun market and we could purchase any firearm we can get our hands on, exchange cash and walk away with no checks. And this is the problem of individuals, certainly under 21, that are sidestepping this sort of vetting process.
So you mentioned that it's something like the 27th one this year or something like that. Now, how difficult is it to actually police or secure yourselves against this kind of thing? Because, you know, I would have thought that if this is happening basically every week, which it is in America, that there would be some kind of checks and balances in place. But it does seem like if you can buy a gun in America illegally, you can just wander into a school and shoot kids.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, there's active shooter drills, which most schools will have these days, certainly in the wake of Sandy Hook, which was 10 years ago. But we have a situation here which is epidemic in terms of the access to firearms. Now, here in the United Kingdom, and I've had a few people on Twitter already scold me and say, you know, who are we as a country to say that we should be preaching about firearm control? The last time we had a school shooting was 26 years ago in
Dunblane, yeah.
And that brought about the Cullen report, which looked at then restricting access to firearms to either up to .22 or barrel loaded. So you're talking about shotguns here. The checks by the police are very extensive. And most of the firearms that are used, and we bear in mind, in the same 6 months, the Americans have had 27 school shootings. We've had no gun killings in this country whatsoever. So the controls are in place. Yes, criminal to criminal attacks will take place. But, you know, on the whole, we're a far safer country, inevitably, because of some controls being in place.
And we're going to be talking to Greg Swenson, I believe, very shortly from Republicans Overseas. So we'll talk to him more about the political side of it. But just from your perspective, I remember after Sandy Hook seeing President Obama actually shedding tears when he was discussing, I mean, to this day, I still can't get my head around that event, you know, as a mother as well. It's just unthinkable that something like this has happened to children between 5 years and 11 years old. What does it take for that what could push it over the edge to make it that there's at least some movement on this? Because it always seems that we become stuck in the same place, or America becomes stuck in the same place, despite something so grave and depraved as this.
Well, I mean, that's a question probably for your next guest, who can better answer that, to be absolutely frank. I mean, Biden has been president for over 2 years, already in office. Prior to that, he was a vice president with Barack Obama. On both the Democrat and the Republican side, there are controls that could be put in place. Now, I'm not denying people potentially having access to firearms. I've been around firearms most of my adult life. I used to have pre-Dunblane, I had a firearms license. So, you know, we have to look at how Democrats and Republicans should be coming together to control these kind of loopholes in the law over there and make it far more accountable in terms of certainly the checks, that it isn't just on criminality, that there is an inclusion also of mental health.
Yes, indeed. Look, Will, thank you very, very much. As always, Will Getty's there, of course, security expert, giving us the lowdown on what's been going on over the pond. Well, look, loads of you have been getting in touch, of course, as well. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Patrick, with everything going on in the world and all that's going on here, do we really care about the Downing Street Sue Gray reports? I don't think we do.
Well, I mean, it does sort of, the conversation we've just had about, you know, 19 children, and I can't remember the figures now, but that, when we then underrated that and then we speak about the Sue Gray report, of course, it does seem very trivial in comparison, and in comparison to indeed other things that are going on in the world, not least the war in Ukraine.
No, absolutely.
But it is, sadly, what's going to perhaps define this government for a few months, and so it matters for that reason.
Potentially. I mean, every single day I'm inundated with emails, gbviews, gbnews.uk, telling me how you just don't care about Partygate. So I'm begging you all to move on from Partygate. I'm fed up with the way the media are dragging this out. That's from Lillian, and I think that's a common view, Lillian. In fact, we get hundreds of emails saying just that every single day. gbviews, gbnews.uk.
Yes, well, let's see if at least our GB News political correspondent Tom Harwood can enlighten us somewhat to what we can expect today in relation to that. Tom, how are things with Larry first? I'm told to ask you. And, OK, we are going straight to an update from Tom on Partygate.
That's right, Mercy. Larry will, I'm afraid, have to wait. I've just been told from a senior source within Downing Street that Downing Street has now received the Sue Gray report. They have received it in full. It is 37 pages long, and we're expecting that Downing Street will go over the report and then publish it fairly shortly. It will be available online, just as the interim report was several months ago. But yes, I can confirm now from a senior source in Downing Street that 10 Downing Street has received the Sue Gray report, and we can expect it to be published in the next few hours. Of course, the Prime Minister is speaking at Prime Minister's Questions from midday and potentially will be making a statement following that, as he has promised to do so. So the details we know so far is that the Sue Gray report has landed in Downing Street. It's complete and it's 37 pages long.
OK. All right. Is it the longest suicide note in history for Boris Johnson, do you think, or not?
Well, we'll have to wait and see exactly what's in it. Potentially the most damaging parts will not be what's written,
pictures,
but what is included in terms of pictures. Because so far throughout the whole of this scandal, it's the visceral imagery that has delivered the strongest reaction. So might there be worse pictures than the one that got leaked to ITV News this week? Might they actually be more tame? Might things that have been described as parties look less like parties, or might they look more like parties? I think particularly the pictures will be the key point, and we will bring them to the audience of GB News as soon as we possibly can.
No, I get all of that. Is this only a big story if Boris Johnson resigns?
I think it's a significant story because of the potential political fallout. That doesn't just mean the resignation of the Prime Minister. It means those two by-elections that take place on the 23rd of June. It means the stability of this government. It means this government's ability to pass legislation. We're expecting big legislation, whether that's potential tax cuts in 2024, whether that's potentially planning reform, whether that's so many different things that this government needs to do, trade deals, post-Brexit trade deals around the world. That becomes harder, governing becomes harder, if Conservative MPs no longer want to follow Boris Johnson, even if he remains in power. If his moral authority is weakened, the way our country is governed changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Tom, thank you very much. I'll tell you what, get in touch with us, GBViews, gbnews.uk. Do you care about this Sue Gray report? Just let us know.
Yeah, let us know. And also, I think because, of course, the Prime Minister could have potentially misled Parliament, and that will be investigated by a Privileges Committee, I believe, I don't know, by the Standards Committee, whatever. Tom can enlighten us later. But that could mean he would have to resign, couldn't he? And that's why this is actually a significant moment, because this could set off a whole series of events which could lead to perhaps even a change of Prime Minister, perhaps later on down the line a change of government. We don't know.
Yeah, I just think, you know, the kind of usual media types make a massive deal out of this kind of stuff, you know, every single time. He's got to go, he's got to go, he's got to go, he's got to go. And that's what they do, and that's quite kind of typical, really, I think. And, yeah, for me, anyway, it's just a bit dull. But anyway, there we go. Moving on from that now. The shooting in Texas has obviously taken place. We'll talk to Greg Swenson, the chair of Republicans Overseas and friend of the channel. That's coming up very, very shortly. Oh, no, it's right now. Yeah. There we go. Fantastic. Well done.
Yes. Hello, Greg. Obviously, really depressing circumstances to be talking under. I mean, the simple question is, to you as a Republican, does America need much stricter gun laws?
Well, I think America needs sensible gun laws, and I would say stricter is probably a qualitative or a relative term, but there's no reason for people with mental challenges or mental health issues, as well as criminals. There's no reason for them to have access to weapons, and I think that's what we learn every time there's a tragedy like this. When so many of these, I'm not sure about this one because the facts are just coming through, but on the past ones, the well-known like Parkland, Florida, and in Connecticut 10 years ago in Sandy Hook, there was really obvious moments in the shooters where they should have been detained or hospitalized or imprisoned, and I think that's one of the tragedies here. So I think we have to just try to keep some perspective that yes, there should be strict. There's no doubt. I think we can all agree on that.
I see what you're saying, but I mean, in this case, we don't know the details about this particular individual who committed this horrible crime. We don't know what his mental health history is. I mean, for all we know at this point, everything is speculation, of course, but he could have never been known to authorities or anything like that, and yet he was still able to walk in and legally buy a gun and go commit what he did. So there will always be that chance for somebody to go and do this if there's not strict gun laws, surely.
No, Mercy, it's a good point. I mean, there's no, the laws are in place to try to avoid these situations by, for example, your earlier guest was saying that, convicted felons have challenges. There are some sensible laws in place now, perhaps not enough. And so there's always going to be exceptions. There's always going to be someone that showed no signs of problems. It happens all over the world, not just in the U.S. The U.S. is 4.6% of the world's population, only accounts for 1% of the world's shooters. It's just that these school shootings are absolutely painful. And so I just can't imagine a more tragic moment. But just again, I want to remind viewers that tragedy that those poor parents are suffering happens every weekend in Chicago. We had 800 homicides last year in Chicago. Every weekend is a shooting event, basically a mass shooting event. That seems to be overlooked completely by corporate media in the U.S., and it's really, really shameful. And by the way, the cities where this is happening, guns are illegal. There are not just strict gun control laws. Guns are illegal in Chicago and New York, and it's just an absolute tragedy.
Yes, all right, Greg, look, thank you very, very much, Greg. Great to have you on the show, as usual. Sorry, we're just a bit pressed for time. Greg Swenson there, of course, chat of Republicans overseas. Loads of you have been getting in touch, actually, gbviews at gbnews.uk, specifically about Partygate. In a word, no, I don't care, actually, about the Sue Gray report. This is from Marie. I'm sick to death of hearing about it, actually, as well.
How do you think we feel?
Yes, tell me about it. Loads of people getting... So I don't care about this. This is from Mike, absolutely. No, I don't care. That's from Jerry. Sick of hearing it, and that's from Alice.
I think the task for us maybe is to try and find somebody who does actually care about this. And actually,
do you care?
If you care, please get in touch and actually tell us why you do and why it's important to you. And, we'll see what percentage of people...
Let us know. Let's see if we can find anyone who actually really cares on GB News anyway. gbviews at gbnews.uk. We've got loads coming up after the break, though. We dive into the world of home improvement with Grand Design's Michelle O'Gunderhin. I'm terrible at DIY, no shock there, but hopefully she can teach me a thing or two. Stay tuned.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:26 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christie's on GB News Live, on your TV, online, radio and on our app.
Yes, indeed, we're everywhere. Right, yesterday we got to spend a little bit of time talking about one of Mercy's favourite hobbies. I didn't, I was off sick. Got a story about that for you later, by the way. Doesn't cover me in glory. It seems some of you share that passion as well. GB News viewer and listener Nikki Lang from Leicestershire wrote in to tell us Just caught the last half hour of the show. Both Mercy and Tom are on top form. Thank you very much. Cheers, mate. Yes, OK, good. Mercy's enthusiasm for DIY was delightful.
Yes, well, Patrick unfortunately missed yesterday's DIY talk, riveting stuff. You really really missed out there. But that's fine. Thanks to Nikki's enthusiasm for my enthusiasm about DIY, we're going to do it again. Oh, isn't that fantastic?
Oh, I'm delighted, yes. Yes, absolutely.
Well, this time with Patrick. Our next guest is an interior designer extraordinaire, magazine editor and a presenter on Channel 4's Grand Designs House of the Year. Grand Designs is one of my favourite programmes.
Yeah.
And BBC.
It never comes in under budget, does it, on Grand Designs? It's always like...
tend to do that, yeah.
Gary and Linda have accidentally spent £1 million more than they were hoping for. Yeah. Well, classic. I could have told you that anyway.
Well, anyway, she's going to give us tips to make the most of our outdoor spaces and even our indoor spaces while Michelle Ogundahin joins us now. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited. I don't know if you can tell, I love a bit of DIY. So people basically want to know, they want to do DIY, as they usually do. Yesterday, we were talking about how demand for DIY is actually going up, but we do know there's a cost of living crisis. People are cutting back on spending that's not essential. Can you create a lovely outdoor space and renovate your spaces on a budget?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, we've got to get to the core of DIY is the idea you do it yourself. It's like hands-on, it's getting involved, it's kind of understanding that kind of anything that we do to our spaces has an impact on our mental well-being. And it was actually an interiors brand, Heels, that did some research that said that 80% of us know that getting outdoors is actually good for our mental health. And to me, that's like a real game changer. We're talking about mental health, but we're also appreciating that actually everything we need is right at our fingertips. And I think that's really exciting.
No, look, absolutely. And to be honest with you, it's easy for me to come across a bit of a cynic when it comes to DIY. The reality is, the reason why I don't like it is because I'm rubbish at it, OK? So it's from a point of personal weakness that I am now angry about DIY. But, I mean, is there a sense of satisfaction to it? I don't understand why it's not the point of buying something. You've paid somebody else to make it.
But don't you think there's something about, like, if you walk through your door and you see a wall that you've painted, even if, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you've seen it, you've done that, you've kind of, you know, made your imprint on the space that surrounds you. I think that's extraordinary. It's a bit like the same attitude, I think, when we put up our kids' drawings. You know, it doesn't matter if they're all a bit wonky and the glitter's falling off and they're odd colours. We love them because our kids did them. And I think it's exactly the same thing. And it's also about understanding that what surrounds you really does impact you. But then what we've learned from, say, the whole kind of trauma of the pandemic is that actually what's outside really matters too. And we need to connect to it. We need to kind of get our hands dirty. And we need to kind of have that kind of, the dialogue, I suppose, with nature. And that's really fundamental.
What should people do? I mean, what are your top tips for renovating or decorating on a budget then? Because as we say, you know, and our viewers have been saying, I can't afford to fork out a few $1,000 to get somebody else to do it.
Well, no, I totally appreciate that. And I think you don't have to have loads of money or buy all completely new to kind of do any space indoors or out. I mean, if we talk about outdoors, because I think that's, you know, summer is coming, allegedly, that I would say my 3 top tips are, if I invested in one thing, it would be an outdoor rug. Because the trick is that the tips that you would use indoors, actually just take them outdoors. So we can use them either way, but it's always to me about a lot of texture. So, you know, the cushions that you get, you know, why just get kind of flat cotton ones? You can get ones in loads of different textures. And I use my indoor cushions outdoors. I mean, with our weather, we need to bring them back indoors again, of course. But it's also maybe stools are really brilliant because they can double up as like seating or side tables. And you could just have a stool and buy a large tray. Or even actually something I use in my own garden is I've got an old bit of marble that was an old tabletop that I got from one of those, what do you call them? You know, the stores where you can get sort of remaindered things. And I put it on top of an upturned plant pot. And it's perfect. It's perfect for the coffee table. All you need is somewhere to put your beer or your glass of rosé. And the whole thing I think about sort of your outdoor spaces is that we love patina. You know, that sense that it's a bit worn, it's a bit kind of used. It doesn't have to be perfect. Or even a small tin of paint. So if you're literally looking out on a brick wall, how would it be if you painted it, I don't know, bright pink or whatever your favourite colour was? That's going to be a boost.
Yeah, absolutely. Michelle, thank you so much. And actually, as someone who I've watched on the telly, I appreciate the irony here, but as someone who I've watched on the telly loads of times, it's really great to actually kind of virtually meet you in person. Anyway, Michelle Gunderhin there. Now, do you ever, this reminded me of so Grand Designs is that big one, isn't it? But, you know, do you remember changing rooms?
Yeah, very vaguely.
Well, it's like,
the neighbours had to do.
Yeah, the neighbours would turn up and massacre your living room, right?
Yeah,
and you get Lawrence Llewellyn-Bowen in there. He's allegedly an interior designer, but as far as I can tell, he once made a living room floor into a chessboard. If someone did that to my living room, I'd be absolutely fizzy. But he gets paid for it anyway. Right, GBViews, GBnews.uk. After the break, we answer your questions about the Black Lives Matter movement. Of course, our culture editor and indeed friend, Inayat Folarin Imam. But before that, here's the morning's news.
A very good morning to you. It's 10:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Let's start with some breaking news for you. The Cabinet Office has confirmed that Number 10 has now received Sue Gray's report into lockdown rule breaches. It's a 37-page document and it's thought to be highly critical of the culture at Downing Street and Whitehall. Boris Johnson has promised to publish the report in full and will make a statement to the Commons about the findings later today. We'll bring that to you here on GB News. It's after new photographs were leaked to ITV showing the Prime Minister raising a glass at an office gathering in November 2020. In the US, at least 19 children and 2 teachers have been killed by a teenage gunman in Texas. The 18-year-old suspect, named by authorities as Salvador Ramos, opened fire at a primary school in Uvalde. He was shot dead by an officer at the scene. Authorities do believe he acted alone, but his motive isn't yet clear. President Joe Biden, who's ordered flags to fly at half-mast until sunset on Saturday, says Congress must pass new gun laws.
As a nation, we have to ask, when in God's name are we going to stand up to the gun lobby? When in God's name we do what we all know in our gut needs to be done? 10 years since I stood up at a high school in Connecticut, a grade school in Connecticut, where another gunman massacred 26 people, including 20 first graders at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Since then, there have been over 900 incidents.
The Chancellor is expected to unveil a new plan to help struggling families through the cost of living crisis. Rishi Sunak will reportedly ask Boris Johnson to sign off on a multi-billion-pound plan, which will be announced tomorrow. A new windfall tax on energy firms could be used to fund the package after Ofgem, the energy regulator, warned the energy price cap could rise by a further £830 in October. The RMT union is warning that the UK is facing its biggest rail strike in modern history after members overwhelmingly voted for industrial action. More than 40,000 members from Network Rail and 15 train companies took part in the ballot following a dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. The government has approved the sale of Chelsea Football Club, saying it's satisfied the full proceeds will not benefit Roman Abramovich, who'd been sanctioned following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Last night, the Premier League approved the £4.25 billion takeover by a consortium led by the co-owner of the LA Dodgers. The money will be set aside to support victims of the war. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.251 to the dollar. It's 1.73 to the euro. The price of gold currently stands at £1,483.62 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Yes, well, good morning, everybody. It is 10:38. It's To The Point with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm Mercy Muroki on GB News, live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Yes, well, it's Wednesday, which means we're discussing the topics you've asked us to discuss. And Northern Ireland has been in the news a lot over the past few weeks, and many of you have been getting in touch. And of course, it's been in the news not just in the UK, but in the US as well. US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, for example, waded into the Northern Ireland Protocol row earlier this week, threatening to block a UK-US trade deal if the protocol was changed to undermine parts of the Good Friday Agreement peace deal.
Yes, indeed, but it got our viewer, Paddy, great name, quite upset. So he wrote in saying, can you tell me why the British government and the DUP are allowing US Congress members to interfere in Northern Ireland? I think it's harmful and only serves to further undermine peace in Northern Ireland. Right, well, joining us now is Kevin Marr, who's a commentator on British and Irish politics and author of What a Bloody Awful Country, Northern Ireland's Century of Division. So, don't hold back, mate. Look, so, I mean, where does Joe Biden get off? I could tolerate it maybe if I thought he knew what day of the week it is, but he doesn't, let alone the Northern Ireland Protocol, surely.
I mean, the Americans, you've got to remember, the Americans have been integral to the whole Good Friday Agreement process from year dot. I mean, they Bill Clinton played a very significant role back in the late 1990s. President Bush, George Bush, again, sent envoys over throughout his time as president. So did Barack Obama, and even Donald Trump had a long-standing interest in Northern Ireland. Given, of course, he's a New Yorker and he's used to dealing with Irish Americans in New York, so kind of has an interest through that as well. And obviously, Joe Biden has Irish heritage and is very closely involved and has been as a senator for 30, 40 years. So these people have been involved for a very long time in the affairs of Northern Ireland. They played a big part in helping to act as a guarantor, effectively a kind of godfather or godmother to this process. They sort of step behind the parents, the Irish and British governments, but they're there to encourage and they're there to facilitate, and they're there also to help bring finance into Northern Ireland. There's a lot of investment that's come in over the last 25 years, which is down to the pull of the American and Irish American lobby.
But Biden as a godfather seems very scary thought to me. But anyway, talk to us through the practical concerns of the American government in relation to the Northern Ireland Protocol, because I understand what you're saying in terms of relationships and connections, both politically, economically, personally. But what are they actually concerned about that might practically happen, if they don't get what they want?
I think what they're mainly concerned about is making sure that the Good Friday Agreement settlement, so that's the agreement and then everything that's kind of come after it, all the fixes, all the patches that have taken place over the last 25 years to keep the show on the road, that's not undermined and derailed by this row about the Northern Ireland Protocol. I mean, the difficulty is, and the challenge really is, particularly for unionists, to clarify what you mean about either scrapping the protocol or reforming the protocol. Now, those are two very, very different concepts. And what we're tending to see from unionist politicians right the way across the board into the loyalist community and mainstream unionists is they're using these terms interchangeably. And I think the time now is to say, look, the protocol exists to avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that because it sets Northern Ireland back, 50 years in terms of it being a real cause of division and consternation. It means it's very difficult for farmers, for example, to trade between Northern Ireland and the Republic. There's 300,000 litres of milk a week that are grown, that are produced in Northern Ireland and are processed across the border in the Republic. So there's very good practical reasons why that border's got to be kept open, symbolically, but practically and economically. Now, if you scrap the protocol, you've got to have a hard border across 310 miles of farmland, road, through towns, through houses and all the rest of it. It's impossible to police. It's an absolute boon for smuggling. It means legitimate trade and commerce and business will be undermined. And as I say, it's a terrible symbolic rolling back for 30, 40 years. So it's really is a kind of, it's a zero-sum equation. You either have the protocol and no hard border, or you get rid of the protocol and you have a hard border. And I think the point now is, and I think what the Americans are saying very much, bringing some kind of US realpolitik to this, is to sort of say, let's get serious. The protocol is going to have to stay, but it can be reformed. There are elements of it that can be trimmed and tucked and all the rest of it. But that ain't going to happen while people are sort of shouting from the rooftops and being very bellicose about it. So I think that's their message, which is a pretty hard one, I think, for unionists to hear. But I think in the fullness of time, it will be seen to be probably wise counsel.
Good stuff, Kevin. Thank you very much. Kevin Moore there, commentator on British and Irish politics and author of What a Bloody Awful Country, Northern Ireland's Century of Division, which I'm not sure I'm allowed to say at this time in the morning.
I thought you meant America for a second.
Well, it could be anyone, take your pick, really, isn't it? But yes, moving on.
Yes, and now many of you know, if you've watched the show for a while, that I'm quite critical of Black Lives Matter. Lots of you have been getting in touch about Black Lives Matter because they have been in the news over the last couple of weeks because they essentially use their funds that they raise from charity to basically buy mansions and give money out to their family. But anyway, Alan from Salford wrote in to ask, can Patrick and Mercy look into the Black Lives Matter organisation? Apparently, they are a self-confessed Marxist organisation and are being investigated for charity fraud. Is this true? Well, who better to ask than GBNews' Culture and Social Affairs editor, Inaya Falarin Iman. Now, explain to us, Alan asked if they're a Marxist organisation. Explain to us this story that he might be referring to about charity fraud.
So actually, interestingly enough, it is 2 years today, which marks the tragic murder of George Floyd in America. So it is, an important day in relation to the Black Lives Matter movement. But Black Lives Matter was founded in 2013. It was founded by Patrisse Cullors and others after Trayvon Martin was killed by a police officer called George Zimmerman. And it really exploded onto the international stage with the killing of another black man in America called Michael Brown. But we mainly know it through the killing of George Floyd in 2020, which really erupted on the international stage during lockdown. And what was quite incredible, in a matter of months, it received $90 million in donations. And some of those donations were from huge organisations. Companies, Airbnb, for example, split the donations of $500,000 between Black Lives Matter and also the NAACP. And what has transpired since then is that the money that many people donated in good faith, wanting to do something good in order to tackle racism, has not necessarily gone into actually improving the material lives of African-American people. But what it has done, in some instances, has enriched some of the co-founders. So for one of the co-founders, who is now resigned as one of the directors, Patrisse Cullors, she has built up a $3.2 million property portfolio with mansions in Toronto and Los Angeles. She's also paid members of her family. And this is really unsurprising to some, but also it is very unfortunate to those who actually did give money, seemingly in good faith. Her argument is that she should have paid herself a salary, which she didn't. She also called it white guilt money. She argues that, for example, that a lot of people should have really done their due diligence and they receive all this money and didn't know how to handle it. But I do think that there is a fair point there, that some people did not scrutinise the organisation. It was effectively a social media campaign.
Which is what people like me and you were saying when we were being accused left, right and centre by lefties, might add, of, you know, being traitors to our race, when we were saying, hang on a second, BLM don't seem like the right kind of organisation to be dealing with racism, to be dealing with inequality, because they don't really have a plan. What they have is a bunch of messed up ideas, is a bunch of socialist ideas that have been proven not to work, and they don't actually have anything else to say beyond that. We were criticised online by certain commentators. Sorry, we told you so.
Yeah, I think the key point that you make there about the fact that they didn't have a plan is really the key one in my view. I mean, there's so many organisations, you know, GB News have had Catherine Burble-Singh on. She has a school that helps inner city young people in Britain, and they don't even have a proper playground. They don't even have a lot of the funds necessary to be able to actually support the kids there. So people that are transforming the lives of young people, that are dealing with criminal behaviour among some inner city communities, trying to do work when it comes to serious youth violence, education and so on, often are struggling for funds. But when you have these organisations that effectively paint themselves as these noble, can deal with all of the problems within society, they are not scrutinised. And I do think that it is unfortunate, but unsurprising that it's transpiring over the next few years. This is what's gone on.
They have basically published a manifesto as well. So people can literally go and see what Black Lives Matter, I suppose, stands for, and some of that includes phrases along the lines of the radical redistribution of wealth and things like that, and it basically as well calls
they've distributed it to themselves.
Well, exactly.
That's what some of them say. They say, well, actually, to some extent, it's right that they have helped some Black lives. I mean,
well, they have, yeah.
They've bought a couple of Black lives, a couple of mansions. Fantastic, guys. Well done.
Cheers, Anaya. Thank you so much. Well, okay. All right, okay. Right, well, our final topic this hour concerns mental health and advertising. We gave a lot of attention to mental health issues last week, of course, and GB News viewer Andy wrote in to say, I think you must look at advertising as being part of the mental health problem. So adverts where people live seemingly perfect lives, adverts for drinking or gambling, they perpetuate poor mental health, not help it. And he says, I believe advertising has to change.
Yes, well, Jonathan Gabai is a brand psychologist and joins us now. First of all, explain what a brand psychologist does to our viewers and listeners.
Well, apart from writing incredibly tedious academic books on psychology that are studied in university, a brand psychologist advises brands on what's going to make people tick when it comes to trusting brands, and also about being responsible in terms of how you put your message across.
So you're the guys who get us addicted to certain things and grab our attention when I'm walking past an advert or something, and I'm like, oh, that seems like it's targeted to me. And then you make...
No, you're the person who does that, because it's based on your experience.
Hold my hands up.
It's based on your experiences and your own, you know, cultural, social, economic, whatever it might be, biases that's going to lead you to the point of buying whatever it is that you want to buy at that point.
Okay, yeah. Well, back to the serious point now, which is whether advertising is impacting mental health. What's your answer to that?
I think that in the past, it really has impacted mental health. So I'm with you 100% on that. But however, today we've got things like the Committee for Advertising Practices that have very, very strict guidelines in terms of how far the advertiser can go in promoting their product. I mean, they can't say, for example, there was in terms of this type of advertising, back in the 1960s and 50s, there was an advert for a cigarette, which was called Strand cigarettes. And it said in this advert that you're never alone with a strand. And it had this man who looked very much alone. But the idea was that by smoking, you've always got someone, even if it's just your inner self, to reflect back to. But of course, those days are completely gone. Today, what it's about is about delivering a clear, understandable message, which must be responsible. Because if it's not responsible, especially with people who have been brought up with advertising all around them, they will see through it. Because people aren't stupid.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, there's a massive skill in advertising. The Go Compare guy, he came up with the idea himself, apparently, as well. I mean, the meerkats, until obviously Russia invaded Ukraine, naturally, that was a great advert. wasn't it? And all this stuff. We've had some top adverts. I mean, branding is absolutely king, isn't it, really, when it comes to stuff?
What do you make, though, of things like adverts for alcohol or adverts for gambling, for example? Is there a point, should it be kind of a free market in that sense of advertising, or should the government say, actually, do you know what, these things are objectively harmful to people, so we shouldn't advertise them at all?
It goes back to what we were talking about before with that R word, which is responsibility. So from 2023 with fast food advertising, the plan is that there won't be any fast food advertising before the watershed of 9 o'clock at night. And I think personally that's a great idea. But advertising, to blame everything just on advertising alone is a bit short-sighted. It's also got to do with the actual place where, for example, in cigarettes, where these cigarettes appear. For example, in Indonesia, you can find the cigarettes, cartons of cigarettes, next to sweets. So, if the retailer is placing cartons of cigarettes next to sweets, I think it's a much wider issue, don't you?
No, I think it's convenient as far as I'm concerned, but yes, I understand that it's different for other people.
In terms of children,
well, don't sell them fags then. Don't sell them the cigarettes. But anyway, so that's my view. I think we should get out of people's lives and let them do whatever they want. But that's why I'm not in power. So there we go. Anyway, look, thank you. Thank you very, very much. Anyway, for being on the show, Jonathan Gawai, there, of course, a brand psychologist, joins us now. Anyway,
my daughter, talking of sweets and cigarettes, Here we go. 7. But driving her home from school yesterday, and she goes, "Mummy, I want to do that when I grow up." And I was like, "Excuse me?" And she was like, "What? I want to. It's my choice." And I'm like, "Why do you want to do that?" And it's because she saw a neighbour of mine who's always coming out of the street smoking and speaking to the kids. And I was like, damn it. What am I supposed to do about that?
You can't shield them from everything.
And then I had to really scare her into saying cigarettes were really bad for you and your lungs will go black and you'll die. And so that's how
there is an element of truth to that, really.
There is that. So now I think I've put her off that. But I'm just like, oh my gosh, she's only 7. It's already poisoning her head.
Yeah, I know, I do get that. I mean, the cigarette packets obviously all covered in, terrible pictures and stuff, aren't they, these days?
Yeah, but people become desensitised to it, I think, now, and they just expect to see that kind of thing on there, so they're not as shocked.
Yes, indeed. Right, let's delve into the inbox. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Loads of you getting in touch about the Partygate stuff. Partygate is just a massive distraction used to obscure real news. The biggest story is in the world has been ignored, and Stephen's view on that is the biggest story. He thinks it's something to do with the vaccine, which obviously people would...
I just want to read Peter's view, actually, because I thought Peter was getting in touch to say he does care about the Prime Minister and Partygate. And he says, as a care worker, I worked throughout the pandemic. Most of my family are nurses and work in the social care sector. We were unable to have a proper funeral when my dad died. But the reason we didn't have a funeral wake had little to do with potential fines. It was because we didn't want to take the risk of spreading the virus. OK, fair enough. But he says members of the government had little choice other than to continue working. So do I begrudge Boris Johnson having a drink and a slice of cakes? No. If you're in the same meeting room, what difference does it make? Let's just get on and talk about important stuff. So even Peter, who was very much one of the people who's...
Even he doesn't care.
Yeah, experienced that very difficult aspect of the pandemic. Even he doesn't really care about Partygate.
Absolutely. I think Partygate has been whipped up very, very much by usual media types. But anyway, there we go. GBViews, gbnews.uk. Get in touch, let us know what you think, but make sure you hang on after the weather, because we'll be back soon.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern. Bright skies to start things off in the east. Cloudier and fairly damp in the west. Increasingly, though, the wind is going to be noticeable through the day, unseasonably windy for the middle to latter half of May. Low pressure in charge, that low to the northwest of the UK, tight isobars throughout the country, and a weather front moving in. Now, that's what's bringing the cloud and the rain to western parts this morning. That rain will slowly edge eastwards, so after that bright start in the east, turning increasingly cloudy and breezy in many places. Then, through the afternoon, as the rain sinks into the Midlands, central southern England and the southwest, it turns to showers. And so some brighter skies follow, but the winds pick up further and there's the risk of gales for the far north of Scotland. Of course, with that wind, it's going to feel cool, but temperatures similar to the last couple of days. We're talking 16 to 19 Celsius generally. And then any cloud and outbreaks of rain soon peter out through the evening with lengthy clear spells for a time overnight, but increasingly there'll be further clouds spilling into Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, northwest England and North Wales with some light outbreaks of rain. A breezy night, so most places staying in the double figures, but I think northern Scotland dipping to 5 to 8 Celsius. There'll be further showers in the north of Scotland and that strong wind continues into tomorrow with the risk of gales again for exposed coasts. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud cover, some outbreaks of rain through these central parts. But the far south and southeast, well, here, brighter skies with temperatures reaching the high teens, perhaps low 20s. Then into the start of the weekend, we're going to see the weather settling down, increasingly sunny skies building from the south, and with that sunshine we'll see temperatures recovering. So it's going to be turning warmer with temperatures quite widely up to 17 to 21 Celsius.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, everybody. This is Patrick Christie's and Mercy Roki here live on GB News. And, of course, we've got loads coming up. We are live on your TV, radio and online.
Yes, well, it's Wednesday and today we've been talking about issues you want to talk about, as well as giving you an update on the big story of the day, whether you like it or not. It is that Sue Gray report coming out, and we will be giving you updates on that as we get more on it. But for the meantime, we're talking about what you want to talk about.
Yes, it's 50 Shades of Grey Day, isn't it? The day when we finally get to know what's in this infamous Sue Gray report. I'll tell you what, it better be good. It better be good. But anyway, we're also looking at hospital waiting times this hour. We'll keep you updated, of course, about all of that.
Yes, and the most important bit, of course, of our show, as usual, is your views. So get them in, GB Views at gbnews.uk. We've been reading some out already, and we'll try and get to as many as we can as well.
Yes, indeed. All of that's coming up between now and midday. Get those views coming in. But now it's the headlines with Rosie Wright.
A very good morning to you. It's just 1 minute past 11. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Now, the Cabinet Office has confirmed that Number 10 has now received Sue Gray's report into lockdown rule breaches. The document is 37 pages long and is understood to contain 9 photographs, including pictures of the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and the Cabinet Secretary, Simon Case. Boris Johnson has promised to publish the report in full and will make a statement to the Commons about the findings later today. We'll bring that to you here on GB News. He'll also hold a press conference in Downing Street. Well, earlier today, the Environment Secretary, George Eustice, told GB News MPs shouldn't rush to judge.
The convention is that ministers should not knowingly, and MPs indeed, should not knowingly mislead Parliament. That is, the Prime Minister's given an account of his understanding of these events. But the Committee on Standards and Privileges are looking at this. They're obviously going to want to themselves take evidence from the Prime Minister and from others, before reaching a judgment. And I think we should let them, do that work and not get ahead of ourselves.
In the US, at least 19 children and 2 teachers have been killed by a teenage gunman in Texas. The 18-year-old suspect, named by authorities as Salvador Ramos, opened fire at a primary school in Uvalde. He was shot dead by an officer at the scene. Authorities believe he acted alone, but his motive isn't clear. President Joe Biden, who's ordered flags to fly at half-mast until sunset on Saturday, says Congress must now pass new gun laws.
As a nation, we have to ask, when in God's name are we going to stand up to the gun lobby? When in God's name we do what we all know in our gut needs to be done? 10 years since I stood up at a high school in Connecticut, a grade school in Connecticut, where another gunman massacred 26 people, including 20 first graders at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Since then, there have been over 900 incidents.
The Chancellor is expected to unveil a new plan to help struggling families with the cost of living. Rishi Sunak is reportedly meeting Boris Johnson later to sign off a multi-billion-pound plan which will be announced tomorrow. A new windfall tax on energy firms could be used to fund the package. Well, it's after the energy regulator Ofgem warned yesterday that the energy price cap could rise by a further £830 on average in October. The RMT union is warning that the UK is facing its biggest rail strike in modern history after its members overwhelmingly voted in favour of industrial action. More than 40,000 members from Network Rail and 15 train companies took part in the ballot following a dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. The strike is set to cause major travel disruption, but the RMT has told GB News the action won't take place over the Platinum Jubilee weekend. The union's Senior Assistant General Secretary, Eddie Dempsey, says rail firms have made millions during the pandemic and his members need a pay rise.
Our members, some of them are now in the 3rd year of a pay freeze. Inflation, RPI is at 11.1% now, and this is the biggest cost of living crisis people are saying since records began, and they're feeling the pinch. They regard themselves as having worked extremely hard during the pandemic in difficult circumstances to keep the country moving, and they feel now that they're being betrayed.
The government has approved the sale of Chelsea Football Club, saying it's satisfied the full proceeds will not benefit Roman Abramovich. The billionaire was sanctioned over his links to the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Last night, the Premier League approved the £4.25 billion takeover by a consortium that's led by the co-owner of the LA Dodgers. The government says the money will be used to help the victims of war in Ukraine. Nicola Sturgeon has become Scotland's longest-serving First Minister. Miss Sturgeon, the first woman in Bute House, has been in power since 2014. She replaced Alex Salmond, who quit in the wake of the 2014 independence referendum after serving for 7 years. You're up to date now on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, let's return to the point.
Well, good morning. The time is 11:06 and today is Wednesday, the 25th of May, and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Moroki, and Patrick Christie's on your TV, radio and online.
Yes, right. Well, Wednesday means one thing and one thing only. Our show is dedicated to you and the issues that you care about. Basically, you tell us what to talk about.
Yes, well, we've been asking you what you want us to talk about on today's show, and we've had some great discussions this morning already. We've been talking about Black Lives Matter, the US interfering in the Northern Ireland Protocol, and how you can even do up your garden DIY. You particularly enjoyed that one.
I'm just rubbish at it. I can't do anything DIY.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, fair enough. Right, OK, well, anyway, NHS waiting lists as well, of course. We've talked about it before. We'll talk about it again. So many of you are asking how the health service can get its ludicrously long wait times for appointments and operations down. We'll be trying to get to the bottom of that very shortly.
Yes, and we'll be bringing you the news that cannot be ignored, sadly, for many of you, because many of you are telling us you're sick of it. But today is the day where you will find out what Sue Gray has said in her long-awaited report into lockdown parties, of course. So Downing Street do have a copy, and soon so will we. We'll be bringing you her findings as soon as we can. You know, it has photos in it as well, so I think those will be very interesting to see for many of our viewers, even if you're not too interested in the report.
Yeah, I mean, look, just a bit of context here as well with that. You know, if you're taking a picture of someone, right? OK, so they've got a beer in their hand or a glass of wine in their hand. It's very easy to make that look like a completely raucous event, isn't it? But anyway, we'll have to wait and see, of course.
Yes.
But do you care about the Sue Gray and Partygate report? It turns out that, as far as I can tell anyway, most of our viewers don't. But get in touch, GBViews at gbnews.uk. I'm still waiting for someone to tell me that they really care about it. But anyway.
Yes. Well, let's get cracking with our first topic this hour. This was suggested by GBNews viewer and listener Jean. Could be lots of things. Could be Jean.
It's just definitely Jean.
Jean. Well...
Jean. You've turned her into a French man.
Yeah. Sorry, Jean. I have turned you into a French man. But you asked, Jean, whoever you are, could you please discuss NHS waiting times and try to find out how they plan to get through the backlog? My husband... It's Jean, I think, has been in pain for 2 years and has been on the list for an operation since October. Surely there must be many with the same story. That's really tragic, and sorry to hear about that. Many people are indeed in that same situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And can I just say, Jean, on a personal note, actually, you deserve better. Your husband deserves better, OK? And there are by definition, there are millions of people now on an NHS waiting list. Something like 1 in 10 people, I think, are on this waiting list. We deserve better for the amount of money that we're putting into this, as far as I'm concerned.
Amount of money.
And to be honest with you, it breaks my heart to hear stories like that, Jean, to be fair, because, you know, you shouldn't have to live like that. Your husband shouldn't have to live like that. And if it's happening to you, it's happening to loads of other people watching this. But for the grace of God, thankfully, I'm pretty... Well, I was going to say pretty healthy. That's a bit of a stretch, but I certainly don't need urgent NHS care at the minute. And if I did, I wouldn't be able to get it. I think that's a problem.
Yes, well, let's look into this a bit more with Chris Thomas, Principal Institute for Public Policy Research on Health and Care. Well, welcome to the programme. We hear these stories all the time from our viewers and listeners saying they're on these waiting lists. They can't get a GP appointment, let alone the operation that they need. What is the answer to all of this?
Hi, really nice to be here. So you're right, the problem is pretty catastrophic. So as you say, there's over 6 million people waiting for care, but that's just those the NHS knows about. If we take into account those that haven't come into the contact, haven't gone onto a waiting list, but do still need care that are coming forward, then actually we're starting to talk about 12, 13 million, or 1 in 4 of us. So really alarming figures. I think the kind of solutions are really staring us in the face. The kind of big ticket items that we can use to bring down those waiting lists sustainably in the short term are around workforce capacity. Do we have the right number of people to deliver the right amount of care? Around prevention, are we stopping need at source to manage really kind of the supply and demand of the NHS? And there's really a question of kind of innovation. Are we bringing in the best possible technologies and innovations to make sure that we're getting through it in the best way possible?
No, look, absolutely. And look, for the amount of money that we pump into the NHS, OK, it should be better. And this is a controversial view, shock horror. Shouldn't the people running it be better as well?
So the amount of money is an interesting point. So I think if we're thinking about how much funding the NHS has, we need to put that into the context of also how much we're doing to prevent need at source. So over the last 10 years, what's happened is the things that stop people needing to go into the NHS, and the big ticket items there are things like a good education, social security, those things have been cut. And that's put huge amounts of pressure in combination with the pandemic onto the NHS. So actually, the funding's gone up, but it's not gone up that quickly. It's not gone up as quickly as population need has gone up. And that means that the NHS is actually struggling to do more with less. And that's the kind of surprising truth of it. So I think there probably is, given that the pandemic will now become an endemic, there is probably still a case for more resource and for, of course, preventing need at source so that we can move to a more sustainable footing in the kind of medium to long term.
On that note, actually, can you just tell us how much we do spend relative to other nations, especially nations in Europe? Because I think people forget just how astronomical the cost is that taxpayers contribute to the NHS.
Yeah, so the interesting reality here is probably slightly less than comparable countries. So over time, what we've seen is if we take the G7 countries, for example, the UK, even if we were to exclude America from that equation, actually, because we know America has a very specific health system, the UK probably spends slightly below average and it gets pretty average outcomes. So that's the kind of reality of it. What we've also seen in the past kind of 20, 30 years is not just that, but also quite a sharp increase in the amount of money going into healthcare services, not from tax, but from people's private bank accounts. So a shift to people using out-of-pocket expenditure to pay for healthcare services, perhaps because they're not getting into the NHS as quickly as they should be and as they need to be. So it's quite a complicated picture on the funding kind of balance.
Yeah, no, indeed, of course. I think, look, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I think the British public deserve better than this. But it's not a binary choice. I think you kind of alluded to this a bit in what you said before. It's not a binary choice between what we've got now and, you know, a full frontal American system, is it really? There are a lot of other options. My concern, I don't know how you feel about this, is that we're almost unable to have the conversation in this country about it because, you know, if you want to, well, make any kind of reform to our NHS, then you're kind of scolded. You're killing a sacred cow, aren't you?
Yeah, I think you're right. The reform conversation hasn't been a particularly constructive one. I think if we're looking back over the last, say, 30, 40 years, but particularly, let's say, the last 20, we've overly focused on one option for reform, and that's how marketised and how competitive our health system is. The shift has been towards more competition, a more kind of market-based structure, and demonstrably, because let's look at where we are now, it's not a good picture, that hasn't really worked. But there is opportunity for big thinking elsewhere. I'd like to see in the public debate much more big thinking on what kind of workforce we models, how much care we're taking out of hospitals and putting into the community. Are we using community pharmacists to take pressure off GPs? How are we bringing innovation into the system? These are big ticket items, they're big reform items. And I think that they're the kind of things that need to cut through the kind of more politicised debate that we often see when reform starts to get talked about.
Yes, look, well, thank you very, very much for joining us. It's an issue that's literally very close to a lot of people's hearts, of course. That's Chris Thomas there, of course. Principal, Institute for Public Policy Research and Health on Care as well. Thank you so much for your views. Right, let's delve into my inbox, shall we?
Yes, and I found people who do care about Partygate. We've been asking you if you do care, please get in touch, because many of you, I think the vast majority, it's fair to say,
Sue Gray's report is a waste of time. That's from Simon.
But hold your horses, because Des says, Patrick, yes, we do care about her report. The concerns go much farther than a drink that broke the law. It's more about the Prime Minister Johnson's lies and outright deceit, plus his lack of respect for Queen, Parliament and the British people. He lied, broke the law and lost the respect of the majority of the electorate and is being shown in the elections and needs to go.
Yes, well, there you go, I suppose.
Someone who cares.
Someone who cares. We found someone who cares. We've had to look quite hard for it, but we found someone who cares about Sue Gray report, of course. Yes, Partygate is not the real issue, and Eddie says that we shouldn't even really be talking about it, but there we go. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Interesting stuff, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, indeed, and I did actually find somebody else who cares. We'll read that just after the break. But before we do that, you have a little update and a little reminder for our viewers and listeners.
Yes, I do. Right, so I've been raising money for the mental health charity Mind, OK? And we've done all right so far. Well, you've done all right so far, actually. We are on now, as you can see, £15,479. If you're listening on radio, it's £15,479. And, yeah, that's all down to you, OK? So, really, this is pretty straightforward. I am losing weight, with limited success, losing weight, and then stripping on stage with male strippers, right? And yes, we're doing that basically to raise money for Mine, but also, of course, we've got Nathan Dunn, who's a fantastic friend of the channel. This guy's an absolute hero. He is a hero.
Such a hero, yeah.
He's walking the length of the UK barefoot. I mean, for goodness sake.
Yes, absolutely barefoot. it will be a world record,
Yeah.
longest anybody's ever walked barefoot, I believe. He's incredible. He's doing it to raise, as we say, money for mental health after his own struggles with mental health, and hopefully we'll get an update from him in the next couple of days. Well, he's raised in total...
Oh, good lad!
Yeah, so
Well
the
done.
target he's got is £50,000.
Yeah.
20,000, so about 40% there.
Good
Barefoot, length of the UK, incredible.
Oh, it's
I mean,
incredible. I actually spoke to him last night. I was... we'll get onto this in a minute, but I was obviously off work yesterday. I was quite unwell. But I was speaking to Nathan, really, and he was just talking to me, and he says, look, he does struggle a bit with this, right? He's got a lot of time... It's a mental health charity he's raising money for, of course, and he has had mental health issues in the past, OK, fine. And he's now on his own all the time, right? He's on his own walking the length of the UK. And... that can be quite a bleak thing for someone who's had mental health issues, OK? There's nobody else there. There's nothing to take your mind off what's going on in your own head. And, so please do donate to him. It's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christie's, justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christie's. Just help him out, all right?
Yes, well, after the break, we will get an update on where exactly we are with the Sue Gray report, which has finally reached number 10, which may mean we can stop talking about it and it can stop dominating the news, because we do have a cost of living crisis. But Tom Harwood will be here in the studio to give you that update, and Darren McCaffrey is also in Downing Street to tell you everything you need to know. But first, here's the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern. Bright skies to start things off in the east. Cloudier and fairly damp in the west. Increasingly, though, the wind is going to be noticeable through the day, unseasonably windy for the middle to latter half of May. Low pressure in charge, that low to the northwest of the UK, tight isobars throughout the country, and a weather front moving in. Now, that's what's bringing the cloud and the rain to western parts this morning. That rain will slowly edge eastwards, so after that bright start in the east, turning increasingly cloudy and breezy in many places. Then, through the afternoon, as the rain sinks into the Midlands, central southern England and the southwest, it turns to showers. And so some brighter skies follow, but the winds pick up further and there's the risk of gales for the far north of Scotland. Of course, with that wind, it's going to feel cool, but temperatures similar to the last couple of days. We're talking 16 to 19 Celsius generally. And then any cloud and outbreaks of rain soon peter out through the evening, with lengthy clear spells for a time overnight, but increasingly there'll be further clouds spilling into Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, northwest England and North Wales, with some light outbreaks of rain. A breezy night, so most places staying in the double figures, but I think northern Scotland dipping to 5 to 8 Celsius. There'll be further showers in the north of Scotland, and that strong wind continues into tomorrow, with the risk of gales again for exposed coasts. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud cover, some outbreaks of rain through these central parts. But the far south and southeast, well, here, brighter skies with temperatures reaching the high teens, perhaps low 20s. Then into the start of the weekend, we're going to see the weather settling down, increasingly sunny skies building from the south, and with that sunshine we'll see temperatures recovering. So it's going to be turning warmer, with temperatures quite widely up to 17 to 21 Celsius.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question. Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
Good morning, it's 11:24 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Moroki and Patrick Christie's on GB News. We're live on your TV, online radio and on the app.
Yes, right, OK, so the 50 Shades of Grey report is now out. Sue Gray's final report into the parties in and around Downing Street, actually, during the pandemic has been handed to the Prime Minister. GB News understands that 9 unseen photos are included alongside the 37-page report.
Yes, well, 6 photos are from a leaving event and 3 are from actually inside the Cabinet room. The report will be published soon. It is thought the senior civil servant will name officials who attended gatherings.
Well, our political correspondent, and indeed my understudy, Tom Harwood, is with us now. Thank you for filling in for me yesterday, Tom. You did a cracking job. Right, what's going on?
Well, it has been rolling since 10:09 this morning. That was the time at which the Prime Minister, inside number 10, was provided with the fated Sue Gray report. Of course, this has been such a long time coming. The report was commissioned many, many months ago, half a year ago, and it is finally done. It is signed, it is sealed, it has been delivered. And indeed, accompanying the report, potentially most importantly, politically speaking, 9 photographs, 6 from Lee Kane, the former Director of Communications of Downing Street, from his leaving event on the 13th of November 2020, and 3 from inside the Cabinet Room. We understand the 19th of June 2020, that event for which the Prime Minister and his wife, and indeed the Chancellor of the Exchequer, received a fixed penalty notice. Now, there's a discrepancy here between the 9 photographs that we will receive versus the reports of over 500 photographs that Sue Gray and her team, and indeed the Metropolitan Police, poured through over the course of the investigation. But we do understand that the reason why only 9 of those photographs will be published is that those are the ones that involve the senior individuals, the Prime Minister, and indeed the Cabinet Secretary, Simon Case. The other hundreds of images did not involve the Prime Minister, in fact involved junior staff, who it has been decided it would be inappropriate to splash across the national media. It must be remembered, of course, in this entire affair, the majority, the vast, vast majority of fines went to junior officials, junior civil servants and junior advisors within Downing Street. And of course, the more raucous affairs tended to be with those individuals rather than those involving elected politicians or indeed the most senior civil servants. One discrepancy, however, appears to be that we're getting reports that in the Cabinet Room photographs, the event for which the Prime Minister received a fixed penalty notice, of course, Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary, is present, we understand, in one of those photographs. He was not fined for that event. He did not receive a fixed penalty notice for that event. So there are questions to ask there, depending on how long he was there, why he was not fined for that event, but the Prime Minister was. Really interesting situation there. But we've been getting reports dripping through. I've been speaking to sources within Downing Street over the course of the last hour, and that's the lay of the land as things stand now.
Sorry to interrupt you, mate, but we've just been told, just had it in my ear, that the report has now apparently officially been published right now, just now. So we're going to go to Downing Street, where Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, joins us, I believe. Yes, Darren, is he there? Yes, OK. What's going on?
I am. Hello, Patrick. Very good morning to you. As you say, in the last literally minute or so, Sue Gray's report finally published on the government website. We believe that Sue Gray has talked about the failures of leadership and judgment inside Number 10 in the Cabinet Office, and that senior leadership at the centre, both political and official, must bear responsibility for this culture that clearly allowed rule-breaking, law-breaking to take place in that building and in other buildings around me here in Westminster. We know that 126 fixed penalty notices were handed out to over 80 people, and so Sue Gray saying that the failures of leadership and judgment inside Number 10 and the Cabinet Office are down to those at official level, but also political level. As you may well see, actually, the Range Rovers are gathering behind me here, because we are expecting the Prime Minister to leave any minute and to travel to Parliament just on the road. It's less than a mile away, where he will, of course, do PMQs and then answer questions from MPs, and many of them will want to ask lots and lots of questions, not just about Sue Gray's report, but indeed whether the Prime Minister has misled Parliament in the statements he's made, statements in which he has insisted, of course, back at the back end of last year and the start of this year, that there were no parties and that all the guidance was followed. That clearly now isn't the case. And then the Prime Minister, Patrick, will return a little later here to Downing Street, where he's going to answer questions from us in the media as well. I think the big question for him, and we're just getting, as I say, this information in as we stand here, is this going to change the political dial? Is this going to be damaging enough that enough Conservative MPs are going to question their support in the Prime Minister? The sense, at least at the moment, is that is unlikely to happen. The opinions on what the Prime Minister's done is already fixed, that yes, this will of course be damaging for him. It's going to be a pretty rough day for Boris Johnson, but in the end he will manage to survive all of this. As I say, we are getting this information in as we go along, but at the moment it looks like Sue Gray is framing this, that there was a lack of leadership, a lack of responsibility inside these buildings, and ultimately senior civil servants are responsible for that, but so are politicians. Frankly, so is the Prime Minister too.
Very much a moving picture, this. Thank you very much for bringing us the very latest from Downing Street. Darren McCaffrey there, of course, our wonderful political editor.
Well,
pictures have just dropped.
Yes, they have indeed. And we're just going to cross now to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who can talk us through that. Tom, tell us what these pictures reveal.
Yes, this is the report, of course, which has dropped. We can see photographs from within the report. For those listening on radio, I'll do my best to describe them. But of course, we have the famous party from. We have the Cabinet Room party there, where the Prime Minister is raising his hand aloft. And interestingly, Simon Case is in this photograph as well, which is really quite an important situation, as I was explaining earlier, because Simon Case was not fined for this event, but the Prime Minister was fined for this event. The Prime Minister was, of course, received a fixed penalty notice, and indeed the Chancellor received a fixed penalty notice for this event, which there is also a photograph of in this report.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting, isn't it, just to give my kind of musings on this for the minute, if anyone's interested. It's, if you're listening on radio anyway, it's a kind of cabinet table, and there's a jug full of what appears to be orange juice. I'd say it looks to me a bit like maybe some sandwiches, and some cans of Coke. I mean, if that's a party...
Gosh, that is the driest party I
mean, I'm sorry, but what's... I don't get it. I don't get it. There's a few more coming. Look.
There's also a photograph of sort of everybody standing round a table, looking at a screen. There's the photograph of the Prime Minister standing with the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak. Look, Tom, what do you make of these?
Yeah. Well, to some extent, this does look more like a party than some people had described. Of course, there is food on the Cabinet Room table. There is a glass of orange juice. There are some packets of various nibbles. However, that also looks like various conferences that I've been to. The food...
Yeah, sorry, just to interrupt you, there is one particular photograph, though, where there is undisputably lots of bottles of wine open on the table.
Yes, so this is the photo that we're looking at now is the Prime Minister standing in the doorway to the office of Lee Kane, his departing Director of Communications on the 13th of November 2020. That particular photograph, this is an event for which the Prime Minister was not fined. He did not receive a fixed penalty notice for this event. Now, the explanation seems to be that the Prime Minister was, in this instance, thanking his staff, standing in the doorway, of course, not staying for a particularly long length of time, leaving then. And indeed, some people did receive fixed penalty notices who hung around in that room. So yes, there is a question of alcohol there, but certainly some big questions over that initial event, the one within the Cabinet Room. We have seen photographs now that show a relatively muted affair, but certainly the food spread out across the Cabinet Room table does raise questions.
Good stuff, Tom. Look, thank you very, very much. Obviously, it's important as well, I think, for our listeners and our viewers to realise we're being shown this stuff at exactly the same time as you are. It's just come through now. So
absolutely. Look. If you want to sort of have a look at those, you can go online, go on our Twitter, and we'll be putting those up, I'm sure. Look. Let's go to our security editor, Home and Security Editor, Mark White, to fill us in. Good morning, Mark.
Yes, just reading through the report, 37-page report. The pictures coming out. Obviously, everyone's interested in the pictures there, but some interesting lines from Sue Gray in terms of what she clearly sees as a failure in leadership at Downing Street. In particular, she says, whatever the initial intent, what took place at many of these gatherings and the way in which they developed was not in line with COVID guidance at the time. Even allowing for extraordinary pressures officials and advisors were under, the factual findings of this report illustrate some of the attitudes and behaviours inconsistent with what guidance. It is also clear from the outcome of the police investigation that a large number of individuals, 83 in fact, who attended these events, breached COVID regulations restrictions and therefore COVID guidance. Now, this is the bit where she mentions what I think is a failure of leadership that she sees. I've already commented in my update on what I found to be a failure of leadership and judgment in number 10 and the Cabinet Office. The events that I have investigated were attended by leaders in government. Many of these events should not have been allowed to happen. It's also the case that some of the more junior civil servants believed that their involvement in some of these events was permitted, given the attendance of senior leaders. The senior leadership at the centre, both political and official, must bear responsibility for this culture. So clearly, you know, she's very clear there in terms of there was a senior leadership, both in political terms, where you're talking about the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and others, and also at the official level, the Cabinet Secretary and others, who, in attending these events, gave those more junior civil servants, the more sizable proportion of those who attended, an indication that perhaps this was permitted, whatever they may privately have thought.
That's the key point, really, isn't it? Which is, I know this is literally just dropping now, right? So we haven't had time to digest all of it yet, OK? But is there any chance whatsoever that Boris Johnson might not have been misleading Parliament? He may well have thought that this could be classed as a work event or something, really. Is there any chance, from what you've seen so far?
Well, I mean, it may well be that whatever advice Boris Johnson took or sought, if he sought any at all, may have suggested to him that perhaps it did fall under the work guidelines permitted under the COVID rules at that time. It's perfectly possible.
That would make sense. I mean, he did say in Parliament, I was assured that these were within the rules, so that would certainly be in line with that theory. But people will be raising an eyebrow now and saying, well, actually, another civil servant might just be used as a scapegoat for this now, in the similar way to Allegra Stratton, who, of course, infamously resigned after she was pictured joking about these lockdown-breaking parties. Could it be the outcome that the Prime Minister manages to get away with all of this and actually ends up being a civil servant who essentially takes the fall?
Well, it's our understanding that the head of the civil service, Simon Case, is not resigning. That, according to the briefings that have been coming out from Downing Street this morning. In terms of others, well, of course, there are the fixed penalty notices. We know that some people have gone anyway in recent months from Downing Street, former heads of communications and the like. Simon Case, as I say, we don't expect, according to what Downing Street are saying, to be going. But interestingly, in terms of the fixed penalty notices that came out, clearly the Prime Minister has received one fixed penalty notice for that now infamous birthday cake presentation that took place inside number 10 when he was presented with that cake and 30 others were in the room. He received a fixed penalty notice for that, but none of the other 6-ish events we believe that he was in attendance at as well. And of course, if you compare and contrast, I mean, we don't know exactly the details, and this is the difficulty. There are some who have attended multiple events as well. Of the 83 people who have received fixed penalty notices, 126 fixed penalty notices altogether, involving 83 individuals. Well, some of those individuals have received between 2 and 5 fixed penalty notices, clearly people that were at multiple events. So there will certainly be questions to be asked. There will be, undoubtedly, more pressure piled on the Metropolitan Police as to why there was only one fixed penalty notice for the Prime Minister. But the fact is, they have launched and held a very detailed investigation over recent months now, involving 12 full-time officers. They've looked at all of this, all of these pictures that we're seeing for the first day today. They've seen, they've examined, they've spoken to the individuals concerned, and not just the individuals concerned, but everybody, to amass in their minds an idea of what went on and what they believe broke the rules and didn't break the rules as far as individuals at these events are concerned. And they've come to the conclusion that the Prime Minister should receive one fixed penalty notice, the Chancellor likewise, and the Prime Minister's wife as well, but none other than that. So, yes, there'll be pressure on the Met, but from speaking to sources at the Met, you know, they are not for budging. They are not for reopening this investigation. And you cannot blame them. You know, this was a very difficult period for them that culminated really in the Commissioner actually going. It was just one extra straw, if you like, that broke the camel's back. And, of course, the Met Commissioner resigned amidst all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Mark, thank you very, very much for giving us the very latest on what is a developing story. Obviously, Mark White there. Look, there seems to be an overbearing, what I can see in the inbox at the minute, an overbearing view, which is that if that's a party, then I'm glad I wasn't invited.
Yeah.
It seems to be what everyone was saying, really. But anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, now that you have, for our viewers, seen the pictures, and for our radio listeners, go and have a look at them. What do you make of it? Do you think it was a party? Do you think Boris Johnson misled Parliament? Let us know. But we're just going to cross now to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, I just want to ask you, you know, we've just been talking to Mark here, and he's just reminded us that the police did a very thorough investigation into all of this, and they've concluded what they've concluded. Does this Sue Gray report, does its publication actually add anything, or is it just a political event?
Well, it's certainly definitely a political event. Just to say, the Prime Minister, literally in the last 2 minutes or so, has left Downing Street. He's on his way to Parliament. PMQs, of course, in, 20 minutes time. I think there's two really tricky areas here for the Prime Minister when it comes to Sue Gray's report, and indeed what he told Parliament, Mercy, from at least my perspective. First of all, Sue Gray, in her report, says at least some of the gatherings in question represent a serious failure to observe not just the high standards expected of those working at the heart of government, but also the standards expected of the entire British population at the time, and that the excessive consumption of alcohol is not appropriate in a professional workplace at any time. And I think this comes down to this idea about the parties that took place inside that place. We know they happened, we know they were against the law, we know the Prime Minister was not at all of them, but we know he attended some of them, even if he wasn't fined by the police for breaking the rules. And we know that civil servants last night in Panorama were suggesting that they felt they could have these gatherings, that there was kind of tacit permission from the senior civil servants and indeed senior politicians who worked in there. As someone put it, the Prime Minister didn't walk into that room and say, essentially, you know what, socially distanced, this shouldn't be happening, this is against the rules. In fact, quite the opposite. At certain points, he took a glass for himself and started to speak. And so that boils down to when the Prime Minister says that he didn't know about these parties, that they didn't happen, that all the guidance was followed, that he was angry when he found out that there were parties inside Downing Street. Many people will look at some of those pictures, not the ones in the Cabinet Office, but the other ones, and say, well, how did you not know that these were parties? There were lots of alcohol on the table, no one was socially distanced, people were getting drunk, you were there. How can you claim you didn't know anything about this? How can you claim the guidance was followed? And I think that's where it's tricky for the Prime Minister. And I think, second of all, is on this cultural leadership stuff that Sue Gray is talking about, that there is a feeling, and I think the Prime Minister is going to take responsibility for some of this today, that he and others at the top of Downing Street were not leading by example in the way that they should have done. And I think those are the two really tricky areas for Boris Johnson this afternoon when he's answering questions from MPs and indeed from the press, because there are Conservative MPs and indeed MPs across the House who feel that if you make the rules you have to adhere to them, and you have to adhere to them to the highest standards. The politicians are held to a higher standard than the rest of us, particularly the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister in those circumstances has let himself down. I think, though, the bigger, wider point is this going to shift the political dial? Does this mean that the Prime Minister's job is in danger, like it seemed to be just a matter of months ago? And on that point, I'm not entirely sure it is going to change the dial, and I don't think Boris Johnson's job is in the danger that was at the end of January, at the start of February. There's a sense that kind of the volcanic kind of eruption that we saw back then has ebbed away, and I think there's a sense that many MPs do want to draw a line into this. They know the Prime Minister's damaged, but they feel that in the end there's actually no better person for the...
Yeah. Does Keir Starmer now struggle with this? Because obviously he, potentially anyway, normally, as the leader of the opposition, as is indeed his right, of course, is to, you know, harass the Prime Minister about this now, to have a real pop at him. But he's on quite shaky turf as well, isn't he, really, given what went on in Durham?
Yeah, he really is. I mean, there's definitely no doubt that the sting of Labour's attack lines and all of this has somewhat been muted by that police investigation. It is entirely possible the Leader of the Opposition could find himself in the same position as the Prime Minister, having been fined for breaking the lockdown rules. And this is, of course, from a Labour opposition leader who's repeatedly called for the Prime Minister to resign on that matter, to resign even for being investigated, and in some ways put himself up on a pedestal as someone who is not like Boris Johnson, who does believe in standards and who does believe that the law should have been followed and that leadership is about setting an example. So if he is found to have broken the law himself, of course that is incredibly tricky. It's tricky even today for him to attack the Prime Minister, given that police investigation. Of course, Keir Starmer has said he would resign if he does get a fixed penalty notice, and that's the weird thing about this politics, isn't it, Patrick? In many ways, you're right. Keir Starmer is a bit muted today. He's, he cannot attack the Prime Minister like he did just a couple of months ago, and there'll be lots of Conservative MPs shouting back if he does today about that Durham police investigation. But let's say Keir Starmer is fined. Let's say he does resign. That then, conversely, puts more pressure on Boris Johnson, because there will be a sense that he's taken responsibility while the Prime Minister possibly has not. So it's all very political, it's all very fluid, and it is going to be a very tough day for Boris Johnson. We're going to hear him say sorry and apologise, I suspect, a lot today. Will it be enough fundamentally for the people that matter in all of this? And I'm sorry to suggest that you out there don't matter, but for Conservative MPs who will ultimately decide his future, I suspect it probably will be.
Look, Darren, thank you very, very much. Great stuff. That Darren McCaffrey, of course, there, our political editor. Right, well, that's basically it from us now, but there's clearly lots of news to get stuck into, so we're going to go over now to Gloria, and yes, just stay tuned, OK, because I'm going to give you the very latest on all of this.
Yes, see you tomorrow.
Welcome to PMQs Live. Well, in the last few minutes, the Sue Gray report into COVID breaches in Number 10 has been published. Here is a summary of some of the main points. There was no thought in Number 10 for the sacrifices people across the country were making during the pandemic. The excessive usage of alcohol in Number 10 was not appropriate in any work environment. At least some of the gatherings in question represented a serious failure to observe the high standards expected of people working in government. And the culture in Number 10 was not fitting with the situation the country found itself in during that time. Let's talk now with my panel. Labour's Margaret Hodge, Conservative Kevin Hollenrake, and our own political correspondent, Tom Harwood. And Tom, I'm going to come first to you, just to give us a summary before we get our political reaction.
Yes, certainly there's a lot to digest, and no one has yet had time to read all 37 pages of